there's an advantage for sure of having had the reps of what it means to have build like a content engine and how that translates into leads for whatever it is that you want, people to be able to see or start using, if whether that's whether that's if you're a consultant or if there's like a product. Um, so I think like it can be a little uncomfortable if you haven't done it before, but then you realize this is the way to stand out. This is my differentiator in this competitive market right now. But that's the future. And I think in some ways anybody and everyone is DevRel at this point. And
Yeah.
maybe the developer part isn't as relevant to certain roles, but I see product managers talking a lot more with that same DevRel type of energy now than I've ever seen. I've seen a lot more solution architects on LinkedIn and Twitter, sharing their insights and expertise, getting on panels and really putting their career out there for the world to see. So this is a thing I'm sure we'll see more of.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to CTO Confidential. I'm here with Nnenna Ndukwe, who is the lead of developer relations at Qodo and also an incredible content creator, engineer, and general AI enthusiast, really, really building a lot of content around AI engineering, which is awesome. And we met at AI Engineer in Miami, and you gave an awesome talk really around code quality at scale and what really Kodo's main mission is. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Really glad to be here.
Amazing, amazing. So I love to kick the show off for everyone watching really with every guest's origin story. So where you came into software engineering and where you are today, and just kind of giving us kind of a background of where you're coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I started in software development and like the tech industry maybe 10 years ago at this point. I was working as a tanning consultant at a tanning salon in Houston. And like in my free time, I would see like these ads on my websites about building websites for free or like, designing UIs for free. And that was like Codecademy, Free Code Camp, and all of these platforms that expose you to web development. And I was like, this is super cool. So I started going through those lessons and I got really into it, doing it every day within any free moment that I had. And eventually realized that that's an actual career that people get
Yeah.
paid to do, is to be a web developer. So at that point, I knew I was like, I've got to leave Houston. And I moved up to Boston. And that's where I started focusing, taking computer science courses and totally immersing myself in the tech industry here, whether it was like free seminars at Harvard or MIT, chatting with professors and building alongside people through different nonprofit orgs where, women or people in tech would just come together and build. And that's kind of how I really got my start in tech as a software developer.
That's incredible. That's a lot very similar to my own start also, in that I kind of came into it quite by accident. I was working odd jobs. I was a waiter and I worked at a rock climbing gym and I was setting routes. And then one day a friend had started a web development company and it was, hey, I think you could do this. And then it just gradually grew on me over time. And you kind of keep pulling on the thread and you realize like, oh, well, this leads into all sorts of opportunities, which is amazing. And so when you moved from Houston to Boston, did you have family in Boston? Like, was there like a reason for that's pick? Yeah, because that's a huge pick.
Yeah, that was definitely strategic on my part. I called my aunt, who is a computer science professor at Northeastern University and some other like community colleges, and I called her up and I was like, "Hey, I want to make the move to Boston, and this is what I want to do. Can you help me, or can I move in with you?" And she said, "Absolutely." So
Amazing.
yeah, I booked a plane ticket. It was like the last dollars that I had. I don't think I could even afford to buy food in the airport when I was on my way. But I was so determined, so much conviction that once I got there, having someone like her with this background already in computer science, she could introduce me to the right people, help me get on track with taking classes and just, move forward. And that's exactly what happened.
That is awesome. I love hearing that, and it's not your typical like, "Oh, so I just, like, moved to Silicon Valley and tried to make it happen," and that was definitely, one of the things I remember early in my career is it was very easy almost to get started in the sense that I had this web developer job. I always found that and you kinda hit this mid-level, but the move into kind of getting to those first proper gigs. So I remember my first gigs were very freelance, and to be quite frank, I wasn't put to the test. But then when I
Right.
started interviewing in these, like, hardcore coding interviews, I remember that being the next big hurdle. Did you find the same thing, like, kind of like getting in, taking the courses? What was it like kind of when you had to make that next step?
Well, one thing that really helped was that I eventually ended up at a coding boot camp. And so I think their focus was not just learning modern full stack web development, but also preparing for what those real interviews will be like being on, like actually in a tech company, whether it's small or large. So any of those office hours that they would host outside of the courses, I was showing up to practice in person, which it's so uncomfortable at first.
Yes.
It's just like, I don't even know if my brain naturally works this way. And I guess I'm just going to have to work really hard at it and get in the repetition of like studying and practicing live coding interviews. But that really helped a lot for when those, big moments, came, and they weren't always great, those interviews, but I ended up eventually finding my place at a fintech startup company, and someone else who graduated from the same boot camp as me was a part of the two we were 2 people who ended up joining that startup company as well.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I always tell people it felt a lot like not that I ever did this, but it reminded me a lot of stand-up comedy where I was like, "Hey, if you have a place you really wanna work, apply to 5 places you don't wanna work and just and just go in with this idea that you're gonna bomb 5 interviews. And you won't bomb them, they won't go as bad as you feel, but a lot of it is not can you code, it's can you get over the nervousness of having to code in front of somebody and be asked and sometimes interviewers really stink and like that. I've definitely been in that situation where I was like, this is just not going well because the interviewer on the other side is just giving me this look that I can't get over.
Yeah, it's super tough. Like and in the moment, my brain, I don't know, I go into like this metacognitive mode where I'm watching myself or I'm thinking about the fact that I'm thinking. And I'm just like, what are you doing right now? And why has your brain turned off? You know this stuff. But yeah, getting in your head, it happens all the time in those moments. Yeah.
Yeah, like I feel, I always like to address that a little bit too, because I think right now folks are having, one of the biggest things that I come across is everyone's having trouble to get a job. And I always try and remind people that this is a unique time, but in some ways it's not. That that interviewing muscle, like bombing interviews is okay, and that's a very normal thing to happen. And you will get over that. So you end up in fintech, you work at that company, and today you kind of pivot into DevRel. So I would love to hear kind of the middle of that story. So what kind of brought you into, out of software engineering and more in the DevRel side, in the content creation side?
Yeah. So over the years, as software engineer, it was like fintech, it was med tech and media tech. I spent 4 years at O'Reilly Media as a full stack engineer, and throughout those years of working on the side, I was always running a blog. On
Mhm.
medium.com or maybe some other platform. I was always sharing my insights as a practitioner and going to meetups and speaking on like small local panels, um, talking on social media and connecting with other people who are, developers or any type of technical people, or even like UX, UI designers, whoever it was. I was constantly finding ways to seek out community and also share and benefit or share with others in some way. And so then at that point, I realized that once I came across this whole developer advocate type of role, I saw my friend Roselle Scarlett end up at GitHub as a developer advocate. And I was like, oh, there's a role, there's a title for this thing where you can actually get paid to do all the things that I'm doing in my free time while still being recognized as a technical person with all the experience you have as an engineer or developer. And that was the moment that I was like, okay, I'd want to do this somehow. I was eventually connected to a senior director of developer relations at of Slack, Curtis Temple, and
Mhm.
Curtis Kemple, sorry, and he trained me for like I think 4 to 6 weeks, one-on-one, on what developer relations and developer experience really is, and how to walk into any company, any startup, and build it from scratch, like 0 to 1. And
Wow.
that was my, I guess, my DevRel boot camp. And I had my coding boot camp in the past, and this was my DevRel boot camp, which gave me the courage to go out there and start working with startups.
Wow, wow, that's awesome, and I always love to tie one thing back is coming from a non-engineer background, having, going back to working those other jobs back in Houston. Sometimes I always find that with, I did a forward deployed engineering role for a long time, and now that's come back as like a big thing. And DevRel, I think, was almost ahead of its time because now AI comes, there's so many products I can't possibly understand them all. And so really the idea of the DevRel role is so important to getting the word out. But I find that I draw on non-developer experience when I'm in that spot. Even now in it running my own agency, most of it is like sales, marketing, talking to non-technical people. It's all these skills that have nothing to do with coding that
Yeah,
sort of coalesce.
I completely agree. It's so fascinating. Like now working under marketing and really getting this exposure, working with other like marketers and all of their different specializations. I'm just seeing how critical like distribution and brand awareness and brand visibility and being able to truly connect with your target audience, how much more powerful that is than just having a product or thing that works well or that's like really cool. Yeah, there's so much there's so many multifaceted skills that you can develop and hone on the sales side, on the marketing side, in developer relations that I think is incredibly powerful and can take you in many different directions. What do you
Yeah,
think?
yeah. No, no, I totally agree. I always kind of got into when I got into software, I remember thinking to myself, "Oh, I finally served my last customer." Like I was, I remember like being very fed up with the service industry, and I was really, done. I didn't want to do sales anymore. And then as I got into it, I was moving up in engineering roles, and then I had this agency on the side with my co-founder, and I found myself wanting the entrepreneurial part of it. And
Hmm.
when we finally went full time, I was like, oh man, execution. So our first year we had trouble with execute. It was very hard to like coordinate and get our execution buttoned up. And so then we get that buttoned up, and every struggle since then has been sales, marketing related, distribution. I mean, when you go into a service business, you like product market fit's already there. I know people buy software agencies.
Right,
The problem is why pick me and and it's just this like even today I have two events in one day, and there's a part of me that was like, oh, I can't like I don't want to do that. I'd much rather be coding in some respect. But then you start to fall in love with that. You realize that's what the business is going to be built on.
right.
This is really my job. And so now I've gotten into the content creation, which I really wasn't as into before, which is the pod. Now it's the podcast. It's I'm trying to release more open source stuff because
Of
I've noticed
course.
that open source is a way of marketing. And I always was confused. I was like, well, why would I release this code for
For
free?
free, yes.
I was like, why would it? And then you're like, wait a minute, I'm never going to turn this into a SaaS. It actually does more for me as an open source code base by just proving my authority, bringing in more potential customers. And I end up bringing non-technical customers. Like I had written about an email referral rewards program I built maybe 8 years ago or so. And someone found it and was like, hey, could you just build this for me? I'm not a developer, but I came across your article. I don't understand a word of it, but I actually want this thing. And then, we've been friends ever since, and
Wow.
have been doing that. Yeah. So it taught me the power of this content creation, the personal brand. But a lot, I feel like we kind of rested on our laurels as developers for a long time because the market for jobs was so good. You didn't have to do that. But now everybody's like, wait, I have to create content like that. It's important.
Yeah, I think it's like hitting people like, suddenly the importance or the value of it. And DevRel folks and others who took it upon themselves to do that just because they wanted to. There's an advantage for sure of having had the reps of what it means to build like a content engine and how that translates into leads for whatever it is that you want, people to be able to see or start using, if whether that's whether that's if you're a consultant or if there's like a product. So I think like it can be a little uncomfortable if you haven't done it before, but then you realize this is the way to stand out. This is my differentiator in this competitive market right now. But that's the future, and I think in some ways anybody and everyone is DevRel at this point. And
Yeah.
maybe the developer part isn't as relevant to certain roles, but I see product managers talking a lot more with that same DevRel type of energy now than I've ever seen. I've seen a lot more solution architects on LinkedIn and Twitter sharing their insights and expertise, getting on panels and really putting their career out there for the world to see. So this is a thing I'm sure we'll see more of.
Yeah, that's very much like the forward deployed engineer position too, that's become a lot bigger. And when I did it, it was really almost like a stepping stone to software engineer.
Hmm.
Now I'm like, this is sort of it's flipped where I'm like, this is almost an end in and of itself. And now I get people who are like, how do I do that job? And one of the things I had always recommended to folks, because I had met a lot of folks in engineering that really went to college for computer science and then immediately went into software and like
Hmm.
never did that, never worked the restaurant, never worked at the tanning salon, never did these other things. And I said, it's the lessons that I want to teach you actually don't come from anything I learned while being a software engineer. I can teach, problem solving, yes, but there's all sorts of, because now you're working with folks that really don't understand the technical landscape. They really are relying on gut. Do they trust you? Do
Hmm.
they believe in your leadership? Have you earned the respect of some strange team that you didn't interview for? All of this stuff starts to come up. And I said, all of those lessons I learned. I worked at Enterprise Rent-A-Car. I did like all sorts of crazy different things. I worked construction, and I'm like, you step into these weird zones. And now I do consulting for construction companies. So when I'm working with these people, they're like, oh, well, that's the computer guy. And then I have to like get over that computer guy impression. Like, no, I actually can understand your problem. I promise you. And potentially build you a program that's going to make your life easier and not just be another system someone told you to adopt, which is kind of like the hurdle that I have now getting into these. I almost want to say they're like blue collar businesses that are suddenly interested in software.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Yeah, the experience that I've had as like a tanning consultant or let me see, a server. I mean, I didn't last very long as a server at like Olive Garden or these places because that I mean, it's very difficult. It's hard work, right? Those are all like in the customer service spaces. And there is so much that is connected to the way I need to be adaptable in with the different types of audiences that I'm communicating with, the different going to conferences and getting an idea of people's personalities and ways to network and build relationships. All the things and strategy and execution that can move a thing forward in a business. There's so much of that I got a taste of when I was working service, when I had to try to find a way to upsell people from buying this membership of the tanning, salon to like this higher one, or getting them to buy tanning lotions and like the commission that came from that, and building relationships so they keep coming back to the same and renew their membership. All of that ended up, and it still does. It's still relevant to the work that I'm doing now. That is a lot more, I guess, people facing and business oriented than outside of the technical aspects of it.
yeah, exactly. And even I would say even in your world now, kind of going into what you're doing now for Qodo, is it's so much different too when you really believe in the product. And I remember in those early jobs, not necessarily really believing in the product, more like I'm doing this because I need to make a living, and this is not my. But when you really believe in the product, it totally changes your ability to market and sell it. And so I think of Qodo as one of those products that it's there's so many AI products out there, I should say, that that seem focused on like eliminating the engineering profession, or that's what they tout. But when I saw your presentation and I saw what Qodo does, I go, no, this is solving what I see as the biggest problem, which is how to maintain code quality at scale. Because let's imagine your startup takes off overnight. Now you can't spend all your nights in Lovable building the thing. Now you need to hire someone to build the thing because you're out marketing and selling the thing and talking about the thing. But all this code is getting sloppier and sloppier. And I think we're seeing this. And so along comes products like Qodo that are really designed to help you get back to what we started, which is real engineering. But how do we do this when we're moving 1,000 miles an hour?
Right, exactly. I think there's so much excitement and promises that were made. So there's excitement, and then there's also fear mongering. Excitement because innovation, new technology, and and unlocked the ability for people to build faster. That's very exciting. On another end, like what you mentioned, the way in which some of these products are marketed, it is a fear mongering tactic of you won't be needed for long because we have AI for this. Now that side, that's not really attractive to a software engineer, is it?
No.
So if you want developer support from this developer tool, by all means, go ahead if you want to take that route. But really truly building trust of the developer community, you definitely want to do the opposite of that. And even better is if the actual company's values are aligned with augmentation as opposed to replacement. You know what I mean? It
Yeah.
can't ideally, it's not just coming from me as the person working at Qodo. It is embedded in the culture and the way the actual product is designed too. I kind of went on a tangent there, so I might have missed, there might be something else I want to talk about that you inspired, but I probably forgot it.
Oh, we'll get back to it for sure, because I think this idea of code quality is probably the
Yeah.
biggest thing on my mind, because I think I'm going through it even now. We're building faster than ever. So what used to be an MVP, what I've found in my business is I want to go back maybe 3 years ago, like pre-AI,
Hmm.
we used to tout being able to build a fast MVP. And for us, that was like 6 to 12 weeks. Like if you
Hmm.
could get an MVP out in 3 months, and we would consistently do that. And a lot of it had to do with, I'm going to help you trim the scope away to get, like, if people think that it's like, oh, you're just coding really fast. It really wasn't about that. I said it was really about, yes, I had systems and processes and kind of boilerplates I had built, and building lots of products helped me
Right.
combine different things to build products fast. But a lot of it was just saying, hey, this is actually the MVP. If we can't get anybody to do this, then we're not going to be able to do that. Now, along comes AI, and now I'm really confident that I can build an MVP in 6 weeks, if not like a week. But that product is much bigger than it used to be. The MVP used to be very little code. Now it's like, hey, you're almost like at the point where you have the thing that you were going to finish with. Like almost everybody's wish list can now be accomplished in some respect. But what'll start to happen, and is the classic issues if you just let the AI. And so I went through a period where um we were just letting, and I think everybody went through this period where you were kind of like, let me just see what happens if I just don't even look at the code and I just let the AI run and I just try and do what a vibe coder would do, but I'm using my terminal and I can always unwind it. And you get to a point where now the customer wants to change this one little thing, and another thing breaks, and they want to change this thing, and another thing, and this other thing breaks. And that was a feeling I was super familiar with as a junior mid-level developer, as a signal that, oh wait, I didn't have enough test coverage, I did the wrong abstractions. Except now I just did that, and the client is sort of like at the end, they're like, oh wait, my product is almost done, but it feels like everything is breaking and I can't get the thing to 100% completion. And so I learned very quickly, like, oh man, like the AI is effectively making all these junior developer mistakes at a massive scale. And now I can't release the product. And, thankfully we don't do these experiments with, with like actual customers. We do them with like our own internal products. And I thought that was so cool at AIE that, people were saying like, no, you should definitely look at the code. But I said, the biggest bottleneck for me now though is QAing all this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And it really takes a lot of time. And I haven't, everybody tells me it can be automated. I have yet to be able to really automate that process.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, QA, it's complicated. It's an entire profession. It's multidimensional, so many angles of it. I think that we'll start to apply more of a deep dive focus on what does the future of QA look like, and how can we have AI augment some of that. In no way is it we're not there yet all the way. But yeah, at AI Engineer Miami, I thought that it was important to, because we're in this agentic AI era, and we all don't know everything, so we're all putting an effort to learn along the way as new tools come out and new workflows are explored. It's not just, okay, a tool like Qodo can help to solve those problems. Yes, and there's an enablement and education layer to, this is the climate that we're in. Here are some best practices, and here's also how you can use Qodo with those best practices for better software quality, so that you can have more confidence in what you are building and what you want to ship. And that was the major goal there. Whether or not you try Qodo is that's up to you. But if you remember anything from this talk, remember that quality it's extremely important when you're thinking about scalability. It's extremely important when you're thinking about when you are moving super fast in this AI era. And there are ways to embed it in a way that is natural and native to your existing developer workflow.
yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the one thing I love is that it seems like there's a good plethora of tools. And like, I
Hmm.
do like that I get people now on my team that are non-technical, my co-founder being one of them, where I was like, you should try and open the terminal and do
Yeah.
this. And I was like,
Yeah.
and they're like, you know what? It actually wasn't, the terminal was like this scary thing to them. I said, no, the frustrating part of the terminal before AI was if you didn't memorize the command exactly, it did zero. So it didn't work. And then if you memorized it, that was fine. You were kind of going through it, but you definitely had to, there was like a learning curve. And now with AI, you can actually leverage these. It really unlocks the power of the computer to more people, but I said, there's still a ton of experience that goes into when I let the AI run a command versus not run a command. Kind of checking, is this secure? Is this not secure?
Right.
And one of the side effects of this I love is, just from this agency perspective, is more and more people are getting their own product to the place where they get stuck. And now they're almost pre-sold. They're like, okay, now I need the code quality. And then there's the other side of it, which is I'll get firms now that have been building software, and it sounds crazy. And I bring this example up all the time, but they're really not using version control. They're still using FTP to like upload files and things of
Hmm.
that nature. And then they want to implement AI. And they have this huge code base that's really like very, very little tests, if any at all. And they're almost not poised to take advantage of any of the AI tools until they get that code base in, like they need to like embrace some kind of a process to even be able to use any of these tools, whether it's going to be a Qodo or they're really not using anything. So it's very
Right.
hard for them to integrate.
Yeah. Would you say, now I'm curious to hear from you, from folks that you've like worked with, like, do you find that there's a desire to have AI kind of fill in the gaps for a lot of the processes or a lot of the issues in their existing processes? Because those things are separate from integrating AI, right? It's like, if AI could actually exacerbate or what you're saying is that it can exacerbate or will exacerbate the fact that you don't have tests, or you don't have enough tests, right? So I'm
Mhm.
curious.
So that's it. That's another interesting. So usually the people that come to us, or the people we meet, they're kind of the non-technical management
Hmm.
layer. So what's happening is they're having some kind of a mastermind with people in the business, in their own company, about AI, and they're showing these things that they see online. Oh, I saw this tool, or oh, I replicated this other thing in like a half a day that our developers took months to do. That's a pretty common one too. And now I'm curious because I don't know how to deploy it. They still got it like running on localhost, or it's like they were able to throw it up on Vercel, but it doesn't integrate with any of their databases. And then the developers are kind of telling them the reasons why it's not going to work. But now this is like the worst case scenario is they almost lose trust in their developers internally. And that can happen. I think this happens in a lot of older industries because what also is happening is the developers are having a reluctance to embrace AI. And I think some of that is coming from the rhetoric of it's here to replace you. And then they kind of like the developers are naturally like leaning on oh, it's insecure. We can't do it. This is all like snake oil. And so where I kind of come in and where I have seen this work well is dispelling the myths on both sides, which is one, that thing you built in, whatever you were using, V0, whatever. No, we cannot use that. Like you have a giant .NET code base that you've built over the last 25 years. No, you're not going to be able to use that thing and just replace it all. And you're not going to be able to one-shot replace it because I actually don't even know what all this code is doing. On the other side, the developer side, I'm like, hey, no, you're not going to get 100x faster overnight. But those code bases are at a point that they're so old that the developers feel like, how could I possibly test all of this? I don't even know what half of this does. I go, well, now we're talking about things that AI is really good at, which is combing over all this old code, figuring out what's in use, where things are coming from, writing all the documentation, retroactively adding tests to it. And then I kind of talk about like initiatives that they've wanted for a long time, which are things like GitHub and CI/CD. Most developers were fighting for that stuff. They just couldn't get the time. The management didn't see the value of it.
Mm-hmm.
So now my job is really to say like that your developer's actually kind of the hero here. The reason you can't adopt this AI flow that you're trying is because you haven't listened to them for a long time. And CI/CD is not sexy. It's not nice. It doesn't really drive business value. Like it's not going to hit your bank account tomorrow, but this will eventually be a good thing. So it's sort of trying to bring, and this comes back to those old sales skills coming back. It's like trying to mediate these two sides. Like this person values this thing. These folks value that thing. What can we do? And then the other thing that appeals to management, I'm finding more and more, is they are in like, some of these older businesses are in like a hiring deadlock. Like as crazy as it sounds, where developers are like, I can't find work. They can't hire people. They can't find people who want to work inside their companies because a lot of developers see some of that older tech as like a death sentence for their career. And they don't want to get into it. So I'm like, hey, if you integrate this and start modernizing that program, you're also going to have this other aspect, which is you can actually hire for some of the roles that you've been looking to fill in and grow and do these things. So that was another kind of side effect because I said it's very hard to tell someone, not only are we on .NET, we're on like 3 versions back of .NET and nothing that we work with is modern. And everybody's like, but where's the React? Where's the Python? Where's the this? And it's just like there's a risk of falling behind from a hiring perspective too, and your ability to continue to operate.
Yeah, that makes me think about how like sometimes when needed, I do like account-based marketing and hosting like these private executive level workshops or going to whether they're virtual or going in person to meet with prospects alongside the sales team. And so I can be more of like the technical voice in the room and listening to what the engineering leadership cares about. It's like, okay, if we're going to adopt or buy this tool because you're claiming it's great, what are the ways in which it is great that would make it easy for me to sell this to management, to like internally? It's like, oh, you want me to be an internal champion to start using this tool? I want to see dashboards showing productivity. I want to see numbers going the right numbers going down and the right numbers going up, you know, packaged in a certain way. The individual developer is not focusing on that. They're not looking at those dashboards. And so their type of productivity, developer productivity, looks and feels and functions totally differently. But we're having to meet both of those needs in order to in order to make it make sense for companies. So it is a totally different mindset that I've learned to is a totally different way of communicating, I guess, that I've learned to be able to hit both points, show value for the everyday developer and enable them and empower them, and then show value to the engineering leadership who are the decision makers that need it to make sense for the business.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that one thing you're talking about, like value for the developers, is trying to show them that you can offload the annoying kind of work. Like, hey, every time someone reports that bug, you can actually like hand that off to an agent because it's usually in an isolated scope. And if you're not comfortable with it writing the code, let it at least perform the diagnosis and tell you where the problem is. I assure you that eventually you will let the agent do it, because that's kind of what happened to me. And I saw a tweet about this, that there was sort of like any developer that just like got in on agents right away and was like, I'm totally psyched on this, was probably not that into coding. Like for me, I
Yeah.
agreed with that sentiment, because I was like, yeah, for me, it was okay, I'm still writing the code by hand, but I'm going to use ChatGPT. And then it's, oh, I'm going to try this Copilot thing. Oh, you know what? I'm going to put the chat in my IDE, but I'm still going to handwrite the code, or I'm going to at least copy and paste, so I'm still reading it. And then it was one day I said, okay, I'm going to hit that yes button. I'm going to let
Right.
it do the thing. And then finally you're like, okay, that was pretty good. Like, and then you start to learn the planning mode. So it comes on very slow. And so providing engineers with the space to do that, instead of saying, hey, you got to go all in on letting agents do your thing, because I will admit, I take for granted that I did that learning curve over the course of like a whole year
Right.
before I finally had a brand new customer project where I said, okay, this is going to be the first project where I'm not going to type any code. I'm just going to let agents do
Mhm.
it, and I'm going to only review code. And that was an interesting experience. And you kind of you revert back, and you're like, no, 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 I'm going to go back to writing, but you got to stick with it. And by doing that, you get used to it. Now, I couldn't tell you the mechanics though. Like that's one thing I've struggled with, which is what are some people are very good at breaking down their process, I want to say. I don't know if I'm so, like, I could show you, I'm sort of like, let me just show you what I do, but I'm not good at breaking down the little steps of like what it took to get there.
Really? You talking about your developer workflow, like how you are building, planning, all of that.
Yeah, like I'll give you another recent example. I went from Claude Code to Codex,
Yeah.
and I knew I was changing the way that I was prompting, like the just the style, but it was like subconscious. I can't tell you exactly, like I'm writing my sentences this way. I just was get an output, and I go, oh, let me add a little of that. Oh, let me change my agent's file. And now suddenly I'm speaking the language of Codex, and I'm like, okay, Claude Code, you're out.
Right.
But there's definitely a shift in the way that I use, like, prompt the tool. And I think that I'm almost learning it by listening to it. I don't know, like seeing what the output is and saying, oh, I have to, I don't know how exactly to explain it, but I think that there's just like and this is the hardest thing to explain to developers and engineers, is each tool responds to prompting differently, but I don't really know how to tell you what to change about your Claude prompts to adopt Codex. All I could tell you is start there, and you will gradually adapt your prompt style to to match Codex.
There's so much that you said there. Like the first thing was you said this year of working with AI tools like here and there, or like AI coding agents, and then slowly building trust really with
Yeah.
the way in which you can use it, and a way to set expectations about what it's actually going to produce as you're using it. Then the other part, um, I don't know. I think there's like tracking. I do feel like, okay, should I be tracking the way in which I'm changing?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm like, there's got to be some repo I have in GitHub or something that is like, documenting that evolution. But it's kind of like working at a job and like doing doing the job and doing the role, and like life goes on, and it's like you need a brag sheet to document like or screenshots of like here are the projects I contributed to, here are the numbers of the success of this, that, and the other, and who I collaborated with. And it is not easy to set aside that time to do that like meta overview thinking, and to embed a system that allows you to keep going back and adding and adding to that.
It's so true. It's very much more of like it's become more of an art than a science, and that's the only way I know how to describe it to people. Is I
Yes.
say like, it reminds me of almost like like they say Jimi Hendrix could play by ear. He didn't know how to read music, right? I say it's a little bit like that. Like you still read the music, but you're very much like letting the or I guess with like the way a DJ would work is like you set the drum beat and then you put it on a loop, and like you're
Hmm.
sort of doing these things, and you're coaxing the output that you want through the English language. um and how is that English changing? That is so much less defined, less deterministic, and maybe that comes from my brain. Like I don't think I was ever a super math oriented person.
Yeah.
So like those were always the parts of programming that were harder for me. Would
Hmm.
always like data structures, algorithms. Those were the beasts that were harder to conquer. And this actually feels a little easier. And I think I'm noticing that a little bit. Like folks that are a little more like on the left brain kind of are like, oh well, I'm enjoying. They tend to take to the prompting and trust it a little bit more because it feels like that, more like an art than a science.
Yeah. I'm allowing it to feel like a little bit of both. I guess yeah, I would say I'm allowing. I definitely was not like a math genius or anything like that growing up. I always had to I always had to put in the reps of training, just a ton, like so many hours dedicated to training, just to memorize like the type of equation that this word problem is actually alluding to solve. It was a lot. So could I perform well? Absolutely, but with so much effort in comparison to someone else where it's just like that's just how their brain actually works.
It's so true. I had this book that I read as an adult when like maybe years ago. It's called Mathematics for the Non-Mathematician. And what it did was it had like the history of the discovery of that thing.
Hmm.
So it would like talk about the history of Pythagoras alongside like developing Pythagorean theorem, and like how like working in threes, and it was almost seen as demonic. But what's crazy is having that history caused me to remember the math.
See, look at that.
And I needed that, and as opposed to just memorize this formula, which was how I was taught math in school. And I thought, man, there's something there to the learning, and some people just don't need that. The math by itself stands alone. But for me, I loved that. And then I had this Mathematics for Programmers, another book, same concept, like relating things to loops and relating things to things I was using every day to build real products caused me to remember them, as opposed to just trying to remember the math for the math's sake.
I love that you mentioned that because that was something I really struggled with. It felt like entering into a math class was like this static, isolated experience in a vacuum. And I just couldn't see how it truly, like deeply related to everyday life. And so that makes it hard to relate to, understand, memorize, and it's like really going out of your way. But that I wish I had that. I wish I had like that kind of storytelling kind of information or way of being educated. I'm sure that would have done wonders. And it reminds me of actually going circling back to engineering and developer relations, because the way in which I create my content now, and the way in which the way in which I guess lead developer relations, is that I have to understand the context of the business, the market, the industry that we're in, the developers that you're selling to, and what matters to them. That is all the type of context that is embedded in the way that I actually create my content, so that it's not operating in. It's not just about this product in isolation, in a way that's just not really relatable or has depth. It's like there is a bigger story here. There are principles here that are important to tell, that should naturally connect to the way in which you do DevRel. And so I thought that there's a connection there for certain.
Yeah, yeah, and I love that you're mentioning this about like the content creation too, because there's there's an art to creating content that's like just generally consumable. And one thing that I sometimes get the comment, they're like, oh, like some people want more live coding on my content and some people want let. And what I've generally found is the metrics seem to point to the idea that people are listening to the content in a scenario where they can't be reading your code, or they're not like following along with their own. They want to just, so creating tech content that can just be listened to is an
Yes.
incredible skill. So
Yes. Yeah,
yeah.
I think that's how I do it too. Yeah, when I'm listening to other people's content, I'm listening while I'm doing other things. So I might not be watching, but I do want to hear, I do want you to narrate what's going on.
Yes, yes. And you're like, and then I tell people like that's actually the key to interviewing, believe it or not. I'm like, always just be narrating that internal dialogue
Yeah.
because that's going to get you through. It's not about like getting the problem right or wrong sometimes. And so that's one thing about content creation. The other side of it that's I wonder how you balance this because one thing that I found is if I try to create content with an audience in mind, for whatever reason, it just like doesn't come out. I end up not landing it. And so sometimes I'm like, wow, the only thing I think I can do is just build content that I would want to listen to
Mm.
and hope that that lands. And then I started to actually see like the uptick in our YouTube subscribes and things of that nature, just like the general metrics, because I said, I'm just, but I still catch myself, like you said, like I still have a product to sell. I still have to make sure I relate it back. But how do I, how do you build authentic content while thinking of someone else that maybe is not yourself? Or do you even do that? And do you just kind of, hey, I'm just going to build what I think is really strong, good content, and that ends up landing in the audience in a very like Rick Rubin kind of way?
I think it's a combination of things. It depends on the point in time that I'm in. Because, I'm always looking through tech Twitter and like LinkedIn and getting an idea of what people are talking about, what they're interested in right now, right?
Hmm.
And then make predictions about where they will be most interested, what they're going to be most interested in the future, and kind of plan ahead based on those pattern recognition and trends. And I think about what would be very useful for developers in their like everyday life or like in the work that they do. What would be useful to them? In most cases, the what I'm building is useful to me too. It is a problem that I've come across that I would like to be solved in some way. And so I'm thinking, okay, if I have developed this, or I guess I've done this workflow change that has made the experience of developing or shipping features easier, then I want to share that and package that in a way where other people can do it too, maybe in like a tool agnostic way at some points or not. So that's kind of where I guess it's a combination of what I care about. What are folks already talking about and what problems are they already saying out loud in our ecosystem that they're having? And how can I combine that with the problems I'm having and a solution that I've sort of worked through? And that powers things. There is another side though. And that is I have this Google Drive of documents that are basically like my manifesto, my principles of like evaluation, my principles of evaluating different AI developer tools and things that are really important to me as a developer and as somebody in the industry who shares their thoughts with the ecosystem. That is all in a Google Drive, just a few documents. And that is used as my main source of context for any of the AI tools that I use when when AI helps me to develop my content. What I love about this, and I highly encourage others to work with ChatGPT or whatever your whatever chat tool that you use, highly recommend working or building out like your own personal like manifesto, your personal positioning statement, even like an enemy list of like, here are the narratives that I see out in the industry that I do not agree with, and here's why. All of that will then end up being the content, or I guess the foundation of your content. So no matter
Very
what,
cool.
everything that you create will have those values embedded in them that you can easily like it becomes your signature. Like it becomes
Mm.
the values or your positioning that people begin to really associate with you over time because there's so much consistency in your voice around that. That has been the biggest content engine like what do you call it? Nitro?
Yeah, 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 yeah. The NOS.
Ever. Yeah,
Oh,
exactly. Have you
very,
ever
very cool.
yeah, I'm, like, wondering, have you ever tried doing anything like that? Or, like, what do you think about that?
Well, I do. I actually think that's incredible because I don't. So I want to say that I have. It's not a manifesto, but it's like a cover letter that I wrote years and years ago. And I remember it was at a time where I was just like not able to get any. I just couldn't get any interviews. I wasn't getting callbacks. Not unlike today. I don't know what. I mean, this maybe was 10 years ago or something. I was struggling to break out of this like mid-level to senior kind of area. And I said, you know what? I'm just gonna write a cover letter to burn the house down.
Mm,
And that, you know what? You're at least going to reject me. That
mhm.
was my thought. I go, you're at least going to reject me. And I wrote this like, I want to say it was like 20 bullet points of like things that were like about me and my career and what I believed. And I've shared it with like our Long Island technologist group. And to this day, people are like, I actually just took that exact format, refilled it in with my own stuff, and I've gotten a job from this. But I think back to that letter and I was like, that's kind of the manifesto
Yes.
that I should probably convert into this
Mhm.
because it really it was just little stories or parables, so to speak, of like things that I had done and that I was like, and this just showed me this about myself and this showed me that. Ultimately I did submit that cover letter and I got a response immediately for like the same day.
What was the
And
response?
it was actually that you got in, we wanted to interview you. And it was funny. I tell people the story. It was with Spotify in Sweden, no less at the time. And, I did the interviews and, unbeknownst to me, I didn't realize that like people in Europe take like 2 months off. I did well on the interviews, but 2 months later, I hadn't heard back. So I was like, oh, well, at least I got the response. I had gotten a new job using the same cover letter. I'd moved on. I got a new apartment. And then they were like, oh, we want to bring you to Sweden for the in-person interview, like the final interview. And I was like, I already like moved on. What happened? They were like, oh, well,
Yeah.
we take vacation in like July and August. And I was like, oh,
Well,
like I didn't know that.
right.
So,
Not only did I not know that, my bills don't know that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I had no, yeah, it was just a very, and in retrospect, like my wife still looks back on, she goes, oh, we should have did that and moved because then you have kids and then, now we wouldn't be able to do things. But so I was like, look, everything happens for a reason.
Oh,
Life took
yes.
the turn that it did for that reason. But I do remember, I still share that cover letter. And I always think, um, this is, and it's funny, I've been working on a little bit of a series on forward deployed engineering. And I planned on it being a book, but I've gotten so into podcasting that I've just been recording it because I find myself like not wanting to sit down and write out the stories. It's just easier for me to do it. And I'm referring back to that letter a lot for little anecdotes, and then I'm trying to pair it with these stories from outside of engineering. I'm
Mhm.
like doing this, and again, it's one of these scenarios where I go, engineers may totally hate this and think that this stuff is irrelevant, but this is just the way my brain works, and I'm gonna make this content for me, and I'm gonna hope it resonates with some audience. And
Absolutely. And I think that with this podcast that you're making space for that, for you're giving people a chance to resonate, right?
exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. It's how do you find your? I'm very obsessed with this. How do I find my 100 true fans? And
Mm.
that's kind of how I'm approaching the personal brand thing too. Is how do I find the 100 true fans? I'm not. You inevitably bring in a lot of likes, subscribes. It's hard to know like what's real, what's not real. But ultimately, I think that through the networking, through the podcast, I'm just meeting more like-minded people, and then I stay connected, and you know John Cricket as well. I stay connected with
Yes.
John, and we live across the world from one another.
Yeah.
But now we're trying to collaborate on something now, and I think it's really cool that that there's this network of folks that are all out there trying to do this, and we're not necessarily celebrity chefs of the dev world either.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
that's like, there's a lot of celebrity devs now. There's like a birth of the celebrity dev, this is such a weird time to live through because I said, not only are we living through AI, but there really is like a celebrity developer status that's developing. And then there's kind of a mid-level in between that where the rest of us are in, but it's really quite a moment.
I'm glad that that we've had that chance to connect and that we have some mutuals and like it's only more of this is going to keep happening as we put ourselves out there, right? As we are saying like, "Hey world, this is me. These are the things that I care about and like to do. Like, what do you think?" And like you either get a response and and you meet more like-minded people, or you're speaking into the void. Who cares either way? Like I think over time more of us get to connect and collaborate and find our folks. And I'm just thankful that you are doing that. You're putting yourself out there to even be discovered, or I guess for us to meet, and we're all kind of doing that in different ways.
Totally, totally. And that's why I really love the manifesto idea. It's like write that down for yourself.
Yes.
Run your content through that lens. Let AI even say, "Hey, like this is true to who you are." You're likely going to build content that's true to who you are, but sometimes you may find yourself trying to appease the audience. And I think that that's such a great way to make sure that you're on track, because I catch myself doing that from time to time where I'm like, wait, am I saying something because it's like trending right now, or am I
Right.
staying true to my values?
I love it. Wonderful idea. I hope folks who are listening and can try it out, test it out. I think it can feel like you're a lot more grounded, staying true to yourself while still, building that content engine and reaching certain goals that you have. You can do both.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then, one other thing I was also thinking about from a DevRel perspective is the public speaking aspect of it.
Yeah.
Did that, because you do an amazing job, like when I see your talks, but did that come easy? Was that, did you have any experience with that before? Was that, how was that process?
I'm trying to think. uh, what do I have experience? I mean, not really. Not that much. I mean, as a kid, like there's if you're involved in any kind of extracurricular activities, there's some type of performance that is that a crowd has to see at some point. If you are in music, if you are in like I don't know, choir, if you are an athlete, there is you're in front of people, and there is an expectation of what you have to deliver. I think like that has been the muscle that I didn't know would be valuable to me like later on in my life. So there's that background, but the nervous, there's a nervousness that can come from public speaking that is very distinct. And one thing that has really helped me is like a vulnerability, like immediately. When I get on stage, I realize that first of all, I can't lie and I can't fake anything. So whatever I say needs to genuinely be true to me and how I feel in that moment, and taking in the energy of that moment. And that is how I actually am able to relax my own nervous system
Yeah.
and know that it's okay, I'm safe, I can share, I can be myself and deliver value. So that's always what I do. I show my quirky side as soon as
Mhm.
I get up there and start talking, because I'm just like, I have to just surrender to this moment. There's nothing else I can do. Hey guys, I'm super weird. My brain goes a thousand miles an hour in different directions, and that's me. Okay, now let's talk about this thing that I'm super excited to talk about. Here's the value that I want to give. That has helped me in almost every speaking gig. And then it's allowed me to connect with people afterward who are just like, "Hey, I really like what you shared," or "I like how you started it off that way." That's that reinforcement that it's okay to be myself on stage. The people who I'm meant to connect with are going to resonate with that, and we just keep doing that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. No, I totally agree. And I have not, I haven't done like I want to say I've done a bunch of public speaking at like our events, but they're very small. We kind of keep them intimate. I've done like speaking at groups, but I've never done like where all I could see were the lights,
Yeah.
yeah, like on like a stage that was going to be, like with a really nice music and stuff. But I always envision, even just doing those small events, the first times you're a little nervous, but I kind of think of it as, nobody's judge. I just try and remember, like, I wouldn't judge somebody if I was out in the
Right.
audience, so they're not judging me either. And if I mess up, I mess up. Like that's, it's really not the mistakes. It's, am I giving the right information? Is
Hmm.
this good information, or am I telling people the wrong things? But I think that that's one of the key aspects of it. And then, of course, I think doing podcasting and all this stuff kind of prepares you for um, what will eventually be, I think of inevitably doing those stage presence things are things that you want to do, and the people who love you will love you, and the chances are there's nobody that hate you out there, or is going to make
Right.
fun of you. They're just, they may not have been interested in your talk, but that's
Right.
the worst of it.
Right,
And
right. It's
that's
like
it.
that's really not that bad. Like, who
Yeah.
cares?
Right.
You
And my talk may not be interesting to everybody. That's the point. Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, and one good reminder that I have for myself is like I should really be interested in what I'm talking about.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, the passion comes through when you're really
Yes.
into it. That really comes through, and you can't get away from that. And I used to be like afraid because I've been doing a bunch of like live coding now in front of people, and
Wow.
because I just try and show them the tooling because locally here I've found that at our technology meetup, people just love that. Like they just like seeing things get built, and it's crazy. Like I take for granted sometimes that I'm like, oh, hasn't everybody used Codex or Claude Code no, they're like, no, I've never seen
Right.
anything like that. That was the
Right.
most incredible thing I've ever seen. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm glad I showed you something new. And then people come back to me and they go, I just started using Claude Code because I saw your talk. And I'm like, okay, not everybody's on Twitter, like on top of this stuff, trying like every new thing that
Right.
comes
We're s
across.
we're still in like layers and layers of bubbles.
Yeah, it's very,
So
very true. Very, very true.
that's super yeah, it's you never know who's in the crowd. That's the most fascinating thing is like you could have a total beginner in the crowd who's like just trying to soak up as much information as possible in this space. And then you have someone else who's like a CTO, a co-founder of some product or tool that you probably might have mentioned actually on stage. The variability there is massive and it's fascinating to be a part of that experience, I guess.
Yeah, it's always fun, and I feel like at least then I have something to offer them at some
Yes.
point. And now the other interesting side, like this is kind of a little bit of a pivot back to like where we started, because it's a question that I've been wrestling with too,
Hmm.
is should people be hand coding for any period of their career still? Like if you had not had years of hand coding, would you have been as effective with AI? So, because sometimes I'll get young people now coming to our event, sees Claude Code, starts using Claude Code, and goes, "That's the most amazing thing ever." But I almost am like, I think maybe you should still hand write. Like if they've only been coding for maybe a couple of months or something. Like what is the new learning path?
My goodness. I don't think everyone's going to like this, but I think hand coding is so critical. I think you need to do the hard things, like a period.
Yeah,
whatever, whatever it, whatever it is that, it's any type of engineering or software development that you need to do the hard part first. The AI part is going to be, first of all, it is the easiest path, actually. Like even whether it's AI slop or producing very well structured AI assisted development, those are both still the easier paths right now in comparison to writing code by hand. And I think there's a certain type of appreciation that developers like myself that are pre-gen AI era, there's an appreciation we have for the mental, like the cognitive effort taken to solve um, problems by hand. And
yeah.
yeah, and the opinions that you've developed over time, whether you're working solo or working on teams about how code should be structured and the architecture that you need to think about for present time and the future, the ways in which that your architecture might change that you need to account for all that the whole experience handing off work from to QA engineers or testers, and the way in which you collaborate with UX UI designers and product managers, project managers, whatever experience that we have had pre Gen AI era. I would love to see engineers put themselves in the position to acquire that. I think it actually puts you leagues ahead of where most people, you always have to think about what are most people going to do? They're going to take the easiest path. That's what people
Mhm.
love. They want so it's really important to separate yourself. The differentiator is chasing more of like delayed gratification. And that's the doing the hard part.
That's it's so true, and I'm definitely of that opinion. But I also remember at the very beginning of my career, like my first introduction to programming was probably through jQuery.
Yeah.
Actually, no, it might have been Moo Tools and like Prototype and script, like, but it was like
Hmm.
these JavaScript libraries that I was just hacking stuff together. And at the time, there would be like an older guy who was always like, you can't learn that way. But then I was thinking, I did end up learning. I started there and I ended up getting through. And so I'm always like, am I being that older guy who's like, you can't learn with the AI agents ahead? Now, I think there's a very big difference from using a JavaScript library to going from that to vanilla JS to programming versus, oh, I had this thing where I just like typed a prompt and it just wrote all this code for me. And like, I
Yeah.
didn't have to type it or read it.
Orders of magnitude, like different
But
there.
I'm open to the idea that there's somebody out there who's starting with agents. I think that agents, again, it builds the interest, but I think there's no way around handwriting code. And I almost think Hunter Thompson, he learned writing. He famously learned writing by rewriting the Great Gatsby. That was like
Mm.
something he said that he did. He literally copied it over by hand so he could learn to write better. And I've often thought about almost like that with like a code sense. I go, even if you have to like see the agent output and hand type it in the left panel, that is better than just letting it write it, because you're going to learn from typing out those characters that same way. And I think you just have to spend some time doing that. And the other kind of thing that I've often thought is school gets more important in the sense that you're going to want those 4 years to not be productive, to not have to make money, to not have to produce value for a business, to just make a fun project that as long as it takes you to code, it took you to code. But then when you get out of that experience, you can use these tools more effectively. So as a person who was self-taught, I almost am like, I wonder if the self-taught path, it's not harder, but you're just going to want this period of time to hand code that school is made for.
Yeah, it's a I do think that the self-taught path is like living life on hard mode.
Yeah, it
Because
definitely is.
you're engineering your own future. There's no, I guess, cookie cutter path, like an itinerary that's printed out that you can be like, "Okay, this is what I would do next, and this is what I would do next, and this is the person that's gonna teach me that, and, here are the expectations." It's like it's free reign, it's a wild, wild west, and you have to engineer and craft that. Like, you are your own manager, you're your own professor, you are a student as well of life and the thing that you're trying to learn. You can seek out mentors, and it's just a lot. You can build your own educational like programs and routine around how often you study, what you study, how many hours you dedicate to that, and what is it that you're going to produce at the end of that to make you feel like you have learned this thing very concretely. I don't know why I just explained every aspect of that, but that's what I've done in many ways. Um, but what you mentioned about the using AI as a way to educate yourself when it comes to coding, like, okay, you see the output, write it by hand. I think that's brilliant. I love that. And maybe you're letting me know that I should probably be more explicit in when tweeting or making LinkedIn posts, like there is an avenue forward with AI that if you can, leverage it for how you learn how to code by hand. Yeah.
That's exact. So I built a little thing, and I say I built, I mean, it's really just it was a Claude.md file. And like it's called Code Dojo. I made a Git repo. You can like clone it. And when you start it up, it basically just issues you problems. Like you say, I want to learn Ruby. I want to learn JavaScript. And it'll give you an assessment, issue you problems, and then you solve them. In and then it'll assess the resolution, say, oh, you missed this. And when you're not understanding something, you say, I'm not understanding it, but it explicitly will not write the code for you. And I was like, oh, I use that almost every day, just to keep the coding muscle going and to learn new things. And I'm like, oh, and I'll try new languages. Sometimes we did it with CSS as a live demo once. And my friend is like an absolute ninja with CSS. So he like smoked the assessment, and we're like, but it was really cool to watch how like it really, it was able to know, like, you look like an expert, I'm going to give you something really hard now. And so it would keep leveling you up. And the idea is to get like a white belt and move your way all the way up to black belt. And I was even saying, like, even a black belt in martial arts still trains on the weekly. They're not like I'm great. Now I could fight anybody. I'm going to stop fighting forever now. So it's the same exact thing where you have to keep coming back into Code Dojo and like do a little practice. And I've thought of taking this the next step further, which is the coding agent that requires you to do work. So like I'd start it up and it would say, hey, you from what your plan, this is the plan. You got to start writing the code though. I'm not explicitly not given permission to help you, but I'm looking up docs. I'm making sure you don't have to go back and forth to Stack Overflow or figure out how that service works, but you're going to architect it. I'm going to review it, and spending some time doing that will help maintain your kind of sharpness. But I've also thought about it for junior folks as we start hiring juniors, is maybe this is the tool they use. And I accept the fact, hey, you're supposed to move slower at this stage of your career, and my business will weather that because we want to put time into training you.
Right, right. That's a proof of, or I guess exemplifies your values. It's like you know that you want to be able to support junior engineers in this particular way, and here are the trade-offs that you've already calculated, and you accept them for what they are. I love that.
Yeah, yeah. I think the industry, is sort of like they're like, oh, like all the entry level positions are gone. I go, well, they're gonna come back once you run out of senior people to hire. Like if people
Hmm.
stop becoming engineers, you will eventually need to do this training again. So I think of, and I also just think back to my opportunity, that web developer opportunity, and I want other people to have that opportunity because this profession really, like you talked about, being in the airport, like not being able to buy the food at the airport, it provided a way out of that for myself and for so many other people who are like literally living paycheck to paycheck. I would hate to see this profession turn into anything less than that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like there was one thing I was going to say. I don't know why I can't remember. Oh, yes. At the end of the day, I think like when you're mentioning the junior engineers and like how do we get people to like make sure they're really learning what they're supposed to be learning to be great at what they want to be great at? Part of what's interesting in this era is that we'll see who are the curious people and who aren't. We'll see that manifested in so many different ways in their work and all of that because of AI. I think
Yep,
it makes that so much more visible and obvious with like your output. Um, yeah, because you can
absolutely.
use AI to dive as deep as you want into like a particular technology or like the history of software, whatever it is that you want in order to learn. But at the end of the day, we have the choice. We're the ones that have to do the prompting to surface that information that would uncover other information, articles and books and websites for taking courses, whatever it is. So it's really going to come down to the individual about their level of curiosity and grit and like discipline to learn.
Exactly. Yeah. Just go deep because you can, and it's not like you run out of space in your brain. Like that.
Right.
It's like, oh, learning that thing. What? It took you 3 seconds to prompt it. It gave you exactly the answer you needed. Now you've got it. Maybe you retain it, maybe you don't, but it's
Hmm.
not the worst thing in the world to know a little bit more about the things that you're working on.
I
So
completely agree.
very cool. So
All right.
I was, yeah, we've been going about an hour or so now. So I always love to end with kind of two major questions. One of them we've sort of been addressing, but we could kind of wrap it up with this, which is I love to ask what advice you would give to a new engineer starting today, kind of just coming out of school or just looking to get into it. What career advice would you give them entering the job market now?
Um, what I would say to junior engineers is like, first of all, stay focused. I think there's a lot of noise right now in the market that can be discouraging, that can just be misleading. I would say stay focused on what are the fundamentals that you need to learn for software engineering, if it's some aspects of computer science, because the fundamentals are things that are just that fundamental. So no matter how far you go, you having that foundation can allow you to actually learn anything new that would pop up or new trend or technological innovation that would pop up in the future or that we're dealing with in the present time. Those are just layers on top of those foundations. So folks with decades of experience are less likely to be phased by, new waves of innovation, because it all still boils down to the fundamentals. You have that, you stand out. You have that, you're operating more like those who have a decade plus of experience.
Yep. I love that. I love that because it is true. I mean, the first person, one of the first people I ever programmed with, his first company, they programmed with punch cards. So like that couldn't be more different than it was. We were coding PHP at the time. So like I was like, it couldn't
Hmm.
be more different. And he obviously weathered all of that. So and he was still doing it just for the sheer love of it. I think at that point is so.
I love that. That's
Uh,
also a little concerning.
yeah, yeah, he was. Yeah, I mean, he had exited some company a lot, and believe it or not, I think his company was in the Empire State Building. It was like back in the way back in the day, and exited. And I think he just had to go back to work. He like absolutely had to do it. So it's always it's staying curious is very key. And then the final question I always ask is, what books do you recommend? Like recent, it could be fiction, nonfiction. I always kind of ask for a book recommendation from every guest.
I'm trying to think. So, for software, there's an O'Reilly book that I love. There's two. Is it data intensive applications? I
Oh,
think
I know
that's,
what yeah, yeah,
yeah.
designing data intensive
Design.
application, yeah.
Yes. That one, I think that's still in my library, my home library. When I used to work at O'Reilly Media, we got all the books for free, right? So if you were
Oh,
actually a lover of books, you could just put in an order. I want this one, I want this one, and we would get it sent to us for free as an employee.
wow.
So I took advantage of that, as I had a right to, and that was one of the books that I got. And the other one was Evolutionary Software Architecture, or Evolution. Yeah, I think it's along those lines. Also another O'Reilly book. And that helped me actually, like, on the job in the day-to-day as an engineer on a team there. It helped me to think about architecting systems for now and the future, always taking into account in what ways could this change with all the context I have with the work that I do, and the product that we're building, the product managers that I'm working with. Which ways could this possibly have to evolve for the business? And let me build for that potential case now. That has helped me so many times.
Yeah, yeah.
I would say, yeah.
That to me is always like what I would say is like maybe in my manifesto of like what makes a program good is that you can extend it. You may
Yes.
not have predicted the future, but you can extend it without being like, oh, like having that feeling of dread that you're gonna have to change
Right.
something.
Right, with, like, minimal effort, as much as you can, with that. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So those are great. We will put those in the show notes so folks can get those.
yay.
I definitely recommend reading real books. I mean, my latest one is actually this one. This is what I've been like in
Yes,
the midst of.
love that book.
This, and so I have the O'Reilly, as I said, it's an O'Reilly book. And that's the other thing I go is, as much as you think AI is like what's eliminated. And I go, this book is dense, and it's great because there is just so much to learn about the AI we use every day. So I just don't see this field getting any less interesting. So
Completely
amazing.
agree. Love that book, and I'm still working through it. It's been months, but I know I can use it as a resource, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's the same. It's hard to go cover to cover on these tech books,
Mhm.
but I try and pop back and forth through them. So it's I'm still working through it myself. But man, what a great episode! Thank you so much for coming on the show. And look, if you're ever in New York again, I know how long I mean, if you're how long are you in New York?
Till tomorrow, or no, yeah, tomorrow I head back to Boston, and then I'm headed to Madrid for, like, 8 days.
Oh man, so they do lots of if you like traveling, DevRel is
You're
the way to
right.
go. I was gonna say there is an AI Ruby meetup next week on Wednesday in New York in Meatpacking District that we're gonna be presenting at, but yeah, one of those. It's a very cool meetup if
That's
you were
awesome.
still in New York, but next
I
time.
know. Next time, yes, there's always something that'll come up again that I could, pop in for, and love to
Amazing,
support.
amazing, amazing. Well, we will talk soon. Thanks so
Yes.
much.
Thank you.